I can do it. So, oh, there it
It's
is.
recording. Yeah, once Malia get off the internet. Yeah, I guess we can just go ahead and dive down into talking about that. Actually, is kind of how heat stress can cause nutritional intake issues as a
Yes.
whole. Um, I mean, you've dealt with it quite a bit. I feel like we've worked through it. I mean, yeah, we've worked through it together a few times. I
Hmm.
remember I forgot who I was listening to. I was listening to another podcast with another coach who was talking about an athlete who was experiencing the same kind of GI issues. And I think we've talked about it before in the past. And I've also heard a few other coaches talk about this is getting used to taking in certain amount of calories at a certain intensity. So like
Yeah.
we use heart rate, for example, right? Like average heart rate for most ultra marathon runners are anywhere between 130 to 140. But
Hmm.
the pace that they're averaging is across the board different, right? I think Vincent Bouchard, I think his average heart rate was like a 138 across 14 hours of running at an
Hmm.
813 pace. And like, yeah, was he up in the 150s and the 160s? But like overall average heart rate throughout the whole entire race though was like in that like 138, 140. And I could be way wrong on that. But that's something that, you know, being able to train your gut to handle taking in food at that higher heart rates is a very important thing. But when we go and bring it back to heat, when was the last time you were in that kind of heat?
Yeah, it's been a while, and it's the exact thing that happens every time I'm in heat. Because we've
Yeah,
talked about
right.
right? Where it's like I've been able to train up to that even like 70, 80 grams of carbs per hour, no problem. And then the heat comes in and I start push if I push the exact same amount, I know I don't process it or like and that tends to happen, right, with heat in general for most people.
So I think my take on this would be more so is like pulling the carbohydrates back when the heat goes up,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And
right?
that's
So
what I
like
started.
in starting, is that what you started doing?
Yeah, and that's what I think I need to start doing because I didn't realize I think how hot it was when I first started. So I think refreshing of what I did. So Saturday did 5.5, 6 hours, and then Sunday 3.5 hours. And it was hot and humid. I think I joked, right, that I started sweating just putting my shoes on. But yeah, I think it's just that I didn't adjust off the front end that it was so hot out. But then Sunday, I did do that adjustment and it felt a lot better. And I think part of it though was the adjustment was like I just didn't feel like I could take that amount of carbs down at that point too. And so naturally I pulled back to closer to I think I want to say 50 and not closer to that 75. And I I mean it might have happened too. So I saw these younger guys, they were struggling going up this hill and I was like, "Do you need water?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm out, but I don't want to take yours." So I actually gave him a full flask, which had 50 grams of carbs and some sodium in it. And I was just like, "Well, I don't need this." And I just dumped it out. So naturally, I lost 50 overall. And I was like, "Oh, this actually kind of worked out for the better."
Yeah. So like that's a big indication. Like it's interesting right now because like when you go race in the end of October, it's not going to be this hot.
It might be. California
Okay.
in October, November is hot, or it can
And
be.
what's the recent weather in October, the recent past few years? Let me go ahead and I'll find out.
So look, we have the technology.
Let's
It's
see.
interesting because it could be hot and then it could
Okay.
be cold, right?
Usually wet and cool starts in October, followed by a
Mhm.
late month wave is what experience.
Yep.
So while inland valleys can peak into the 80s, late October brought a significant heat advisory in 2025, with temperatures raising up to 97 degrees inland.
Yeah. But then it can drop down to what, 40, 50 overnight.
Worse.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're going to be experiencing a huge fluctuation in overall temperature swings from it being potentially 80 degrees, it could be all the way up to hot to 97, all
Mhm,
the way down to being okay moving at 50, 60-degree weather,
mhm.
which actually is really good to kind of highlight now is because when it does get that hot, we obviously gonna the gut and the system is gonna be working harder to cool itself down, right?
Yeah.
So then your gut is going to be working harder just due to from the heat stress. And I think a lot of people tend to forget about what heat stress does to the system. So starting on a lower end of carbohydrate intake,
Mhm.
as well. But this also goes to an indication too, is like why it's really important to keep in electrolytes with sodium. To
Right,
where
yeah,
like
yep,
the
exactly what I was going to.
carbohydrate mixes, yeah, right. Like the carbohydrate drink mixes are great, but how great are they when it is 90 degrees outside, sun's beating down on you, and you're not used to being in that type of heat.
Mhm.
Humidity's high also, right? Now it's like, okay, cool. Now I need to go ahead and cut back from my 70 grams of carbs an hour to
Yeah,
now back down to 40 to 50, but I need to keep my sodiums high. So this is where you have to start playing around with learning where what am I going to carry on me that's just electrolytes of sodium? And then what am I going to carry on me that is carbohydrates? And I think this is the reason why a lot of individuals actually like to keep their sodium separate from their carbohydrate intake.
yeah, yeah, because once those carbs stop working, and if that's your only sodium, what are you gonna do to get your sodium? And I
Yeah.
mean, like that we saw that with Mike right at BPN is we had his carbs really good, and obviously for him, it's what like one of the difficulties is that he cannot drink on course very easily. And so we have to hit him every single loop with everything he needs more or less. And when he came in, I forget how it was probably middle of the day because it was pretty hot out. He started cramping, his stomach was going and everything else, and that's because his sodium was much lower because the carb mix that we were using didn't have sodium in it like we were used to it having, right? And so
Yeah.
there was that like bit of experimentation of like, oh, what is he missing out on? And it was the sodium at that
Yeah.
point.
Well, it's interesting because he actually started happening with an hour to 2 hours. It was like the second loop in actually is when he started cramping up.
Yeah, it was
And I was
early.
like, oh, I was like, oh, we have to increase sodium because we're not getting enough in right now. Which is
Mhm.
another big thing too. I remember when I first got into ultra marathon running and long distance running. I remember coach I was working with, her name is Sabrina Stanley. And she was like, the way you check from a physical standpoint, instead of like counting all the time, the way you focus on checking your sodium intake is by checking on how your quads feel. If your quads are really tight and like hard, sodium
Mm,
is low.
mhm.
If your quads are like loose and relaxed, sodium is fine, and magnesium is fine. And I remember I was like back in the day, they didn't. I mean, when I first got to ultras back in 2016, 17, there wasn't all
Mhm.
of this sports nutrition that's out today, where it's like, hey, you need to be putting in 500 to 750 milligrams of sodium per hour. You need to be putting in, anywhere between 50 to 100 grams of carbs per hour, depending on intensity levels, heat rate, stress, you name it. It was just more so like, hey, you need hydration, you need to fuel yourself, but it never was specifically how much you need to do, at least from
Yeah,
my end at that time and moment. So it
yep,
was a lot of more so like, what were the signs and symptoms from the physical standpoint? All right, is my hand swelling? How's my quads feel? Are they tight and heavy? Are they hard? Or are they
yes,
nice, loose, and muscular, like jello-y more so like to what a muscle should feel like when they're hydrated? And now I think that's still a really good point to look at still, even now pairing that with kind of the science that we do know. I mean, we go back to look at what happened to you at San Diego 100 last year.
Yep.
right? Like we had you did a sweat test, and you're like, oh yeah, what was it, like 450 to 850 megs of sodium per hour you were losing?
It was like 800 per liter, yeah, and I think
Yeah, right.
yeah, and, like, the kind of the offsetting piece of it was when I did the sweat loss piece of it, I think I was losing 1 to 1.5 liters per hour, and so, naturally, my sodium needs to go higher than that as well, than that 800 to be
Well, let's
safe.
talk about then the glucose. Well, yeah, but 100%. But let's then talk about glucose and fructose ratios and
Mhm.
how much water you now need to intake for your gut to go ahead and help digest and break down the amount of glucose and fructose that you have in your system,
Yep. Yeah.
right? And that's a
Yeah.
big piece I think we tend to forget too.
Yeah, and I think I mean, like, so a good maybe a good point here, like, you can talk a little bit about this is so there's a lot of people that travel for their first ultra or for an ultra because it's like a destination, right? We know there's literally called destination trail, or vacation races. And so for somebody that's maybe training in like very moderate weather, let's say, and then they travel somewhere hot, how like is there a way that they can train that? Because we're saying, hey, pull back your carbs or do these different things. Is there a way to train to feel that type of intensity of the heat or altitude or these other things before they get there?
Well, I mean, yeah, that's all why training adaptation is so important.
Hmm.
You know, one thing I remember working with an athlete, she ran 400 Ks in a 16-week period, and they were all in different areas: mountainous altitude, lower elevation, heat type stuff. And one of the biggest things that we did leading into that block was getting her acclimated for heat. And what I meant by that was like, hey, getting into the sauna. And out in the East Coast right now, it's
It's,
hot and humid. So
it's
it's
so
a great place to yeah, it's a great place to start doing heat acclimation going into certain places, especially that you're going to be in. So like
mhm,
that's the first one. I think the second big piece here is talking about learning what your body needs when you're in those states, right? Like when it comes down to hydration, for example, right? Sometimes, and this is another thing, are you a heavy sodium sweater or are you a lighter sodium sweater? Some
mhm,
people have a balance or are either. And so being a sweat test is actually probably one of the better things to do as a whole. And like, do you need one? From my perspective, it's always great to have one just so we know where we're at and we can kind of have a baseline and play off of it. But it's playing with them, right? When you're actually out moving and training with it so that you can go ahead and utilize sodium capsules to go ahead and figure that out, like is one of the big ones there. The next one is actually training at your race pace in those conditions. That is another big piece that, racing at race pace is a lot different than eating and fueling at training paces. And I
right.
know, I know we'll go ahead and have the argument of like, well, aren't we supposed to be training at race pace all the time? And I'm going to say, I will fight that back and be like, no, like training at race pace has a detriment to the system long term, right? Like everyone right now, not everyone, but like what you're seeing right now in the ultra endurance community, from my perspective, and what I'm seeing in my algorithm on Instagram and YouTube, and just kind of information coming out is like, what is what's most important, the longest run or the consistency amount of runs you're doing, right?
Mm,
The question is like, what's that one long run that matters most out of all of it? And like when you break down the total accumulation of hours, miles, elevation, one long run, let's say is 6 hours. We'll use this: 100 hours of training, and you have one 6 hour. That's only 6%, I believe, of that total run time. Is that correct? I think I utilize that correctly, right? If it's 100 hours of running, 6 hours of a long run is only about 6% or something like that. It might be 0.6%, who knows? But what I'm
6%.
saying, it's a very small, it's 6%. It's very small percentage to overall training volume. right?
Mhm.
So we have to go ahead and look at, okay, what was the other 94% that you were doing in training? And
Yep.
that's the reason why we look at it from this 80-20 split, right? Like 80% of the time we're training in this training, and the other 20% of the time we're training in this race pace intensity. Because you have to develop familiarity, you have to develop confidence, and you have to know that's going to be doing those longer time periods. So yeah, out doing those 4, 5, 6 hour efforts, for example, like you this past weekend, you're 3 hours, 4 hours, you don't have issues,
Yep.
right? They don't start kicking into that 4 hour market. And that's
Correct.
where you can start kind of being like, all right, sweet. I need to start playing with different nutrition. I need to start playing with, okay, I know that I'm getting into my 4 hour mark. It's 2 o'clock in the afternoon and it's 92 degrees outside. Instead of trying to hammer in 70 grams of carbs per hour, let me pull back down to 40 at first. It means then I have to pull back my effort to go ahead and keep myself moving to avoid GI issues.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of people don't ever talk about that. I mean, and we're talking a lot about endurance athletes. Like when we go ahead and look at individuals who backcountry hunt, who do long multi-day efforts, it's the same idea here, right? Like to where it's like you have to understand that the intake of food that you're going to be putting in and the sodium and the hydration is going to be constantly changing based off the longer duration time period you're going to be at based off of the accumulation of stress over time. And the
Mhm.
only way you really go ahead and figure that out is through an accumulation of training volume, not just one specific training session. Now, that training session can be very good in terms of data. Be like, okay, cool. At 4 hours in, I started having this issue. So the next time you go into another long effort, you're like, all right, cool. Around 3 hours, instead of trying to put in 70 grams of carbs at a 3 hour mark, I'm only going to put in 50 and see what happens. And then I'm going to maintain that over time, is
Yeah.
really what's going to be the focus on. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's the big piece here with that.
Yeah. And I think it's kind of like when you say it's pulling back your effort, it's like it's the same thing as like when you go up a hill, right? It's not you're not going to hold the same pace on a flat versus downhill versus uphill, but you can maintain an effort, right? Like if I want to keep my effort a 4 out of 10 the whole time, my pace is going to change based on that. And so it's kind of the same idea, right? Like, okay, if it's the middle of the day, I want to hold this 4 out of 10 effort, let's say, my pace might have to slow down because it is hot out. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I like that.
Yeah. That's a good point. I actually was so Hard Rock 100 just got done this past week. I made fun of you because you weren't tracking it. I was like, are you really a true ultra runner if you're not tracking Hard Rock 100 on Saturday?
That's some of us work.
Um, um, the winner of Hard Rock 100 has just repeated. His name is Ludo. He's 51 years old.
Yep.
And he has a different approach to completing Hard Rock. So his training is very much so I'm gonna go ahead and chill on the uphills. Like
Hmm.
chill, just like I'm just gonna pull back completely. And like his pull back is probably my like 100% effort going up a hill.
Yeah.
But his chill pace is just like with trekking poles and just like an RP of a 3, 2, right, for him climbing. But he talked
Hmm.
about how his descents though are like bombs, dude. Like he ended up taking on a Strava segment the fastest time from top of Hades Peak all the way
Hmm.
down to that to the bottom. That's like a 2K drop, dude, over
Yeah.
like 3 or 4 miles. And he had the like Strava segment for it in a race, 100 and something or 100K into a race. And the
Yeah.
idea was he was talking about was at altitude when you're climbing up a mountain,
Hmm.
your body requires more oxygen to work.
Yep.
So he was like, I don't want to overstress my system.
Hmm.
He was like, well, on the downhills, my body requires less oxygen going down the mountain. And the reason for that, he was like, because when you're climbing a mountain, you're going up elevation.
Yep.
So then your body's requiring more oxygen because you're going from, let's say, 12,000 feet all up to 14,000 feet. And then when you're descending, you're going from 14 down to 12 now. So you're requiring less oxygen. And who else did this? Rachel has done this. Rachel Edgar at Coconut 250 talked about how her paces uphill are super chill, but she's holding tempo threshold type efforts down the mountains.
Right.
Where it makes sense in terms when we talk about eccentric loading on the quads and fatigue development, to be able to handle the downhill work and the beating on the quads only helps build the legs for longer time periods within deeper races like that. Who said it? Courtney Goldwalter talked about how she ended up having gut issues about 100K in. And she said
Mm,
she's always had gut issues at this same point in the race at the same time every single time. And she's
yeah.
like, that's what keeps her coming back to this race is like, I need to try and perfect this. I don't know what's going on. And the idea behind that, again, I don't have the answers to it. I'm just assuming, just based off of what I'm looking at, is your perception of effort in that moment in time, 14 hours into a race at altitude at 14,000 feet, right? She talked about it happening around Hades as well. It also is this point where like all of a sudden her body just starts to shut down because she's putting out so much exertion and effort when, yeah, she's racing, but it's like maybe it's training at that intensity, at that altitude, in that environment to get the body used to it. Check this
Mhm.
out. So Ludo does 2 soft rocks. If no one knows what a soft rock is, it's literally doing the course, just hiking it. He does 2 of them pretty much twice before leading into Hard Rock 100. And
Mm,
he
mhm.
talks about how he backpacks it with his wife and his friends. So he's just chilling. And then some days when he's by himself, he'll go and just do his thing, but he's just backpacking it. So
Yep.
he's now doing it over 5 days
Right.
and then goes and races it and does it in 21 hours.
Yeah. Well, I think
It's wild.
it speaks though too to like what you're saying about like the intensity of training. And I think there's this perception that especially when you start to get to these, 100-mile plus type races or 100Ks, that you just need to build, 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 build. Like I've seen, and I think we've talked about this. Like I've looked at some people I know that build to 100K or 100, and they just build mileage every week for like 12 weeks. They never drop, they never dip, or they stay very consistent across the board. And there's obviously different methods for everything, but it's where was I going with this? It's like you don't need to push as hard as you think you do all of the time. And you're saying like he backpacks for 5 days. Like I think something that you've taught me and then we use is for a lot of runners, like using hiking or using rucking as part of training. And it's not to slow you down, but it's hard to understand what fatigue on the leg feels like at 60 or 80 miles because you can't be doing that all the time. That's what deteriorates your body. And you can't, like, not you can't, but it's hard to maintain that much fatigue on the legs that consistently and get that output. But if you throw 20, 25 pounds on your back and climb up that same hill, now your legs are heavier and you feel, oh, like it's doing other things, right? It's building our muscle, it's building that endurance. But it's also like, oh, this is what my legs will feel like with this fatigue as well. And I think it's just like even though my heart rate might not be as high or the intensity doesn't feel as much, it's that adaptation to these different ways of training so that we're not just burning ourselves out week after week and then we're more fresh going into whatever it is we're doing.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And it's another big point too, right? We'll use Tara Dara, who just got done doing Western States 2 weeks ago, and then she took 6 at Western States, comes back and takes third at Hard Rock.
Yeah,
And
she's
she,
just got the fastest double, right? Like
for
the
females, female,
yeah,
yeah,
the combined time, yeah.
yeah, because female wise, I think she had to get under like 36 hours at Hard Rock, and she got like a 30-hour Hard Rock or something like that, or 33.
Like 33 maybe, yeah.
And like the biggest thing behind that was she talked about the idea of, you know, at Western States, she felt like she didn't have the legs to turn over to race with the faster girls
Mm.
because she was training so much of for hard rock. But then that was her interview after Western States. And then her interview after hard rock was very much so, there were certain climbs that I was in that I felt that I could have trained more for.
Mm. Mhm.
Right. And where I'm going with this, in it's this headspace where it's like it's really hard to train for every single environment that you're going to be putting yourself in, especially when it comes to doing back-to-back races. And we'll utilize, Julia was the one I'm talking about, for
Yep.
400Ks back-to-back in the 16-week period. Again, it was very much so mountainous climbing. It was very much so running terrain. It was very much so heat. There was a lot of things that she was dealt with that she had to work through. Where, like, realistically, each one became just kind of like a training environment, training run to get her ready for the next one. Get her ready for the
Yep.
next one. She do 100K, recover, rest, recover for 4 weeks, hit it again, rest and recover, get her ready, hit it for 4 weeks, rest and recover, hit it again for 4 weeks. And it was
Mhm.
very much so like every single one stuck like stacked on top of each other. Same thing going back to Tyra also, they kind of just built on top of each other if you look at it in that headspace. So like when we go back to like looking at when you asked the question earlier about like, well, what does it take to train for these types of events when it comes to having to deal with heat stress, altitude, ton of elevation, having to be able to still run quick on these trails. And
Mhm.
that's the crazy part is I look at ultra endurance very much so how I look at CrossFit. There's so much interference within the framework of the environment in that arena that it takes time to develop, right?
Mhm.
Like it really does. And like you go in and look at these individuals, and I use Ludo, dude, he's been racing and running ultras for years. The dude who
Yeah.
took Jimmy, who took second place at Hard Rock, he's been running since 2012.
Yeah.
And he even said he's like, I can now finally retire. His debut at Hard Rock 100 took second place, and that doesn't come from luck. That comes from 14 years, 15 years of consistent running,
Yep.
right? Like it takes time. It's the same thing we see. And it's just in general. That's kind of what I'm getting to. Is like we're so quick to wanting to play the short game when it comes to all of the endeavors and goals that we're chasing, but no one ever really wants to play the long game of what we're trying to do here when it comes to actually reaching our goals. And that could be nutrition, weight loss, pain management, reaching your
Mhm.
goals in CrossFit, high rocks, endurance, anything we name it, our jobs, our profession. It's about enduring the race, and enduring the race is actually the long game,
Yeah,
and that's
and
what it is.
it's interesting you said that because I just read something the other day and I can't remember who it was, but it was like some athletes train for 10 years and others athletes train 1 year 10 times. And I think
Yeah.
like we do that, right? Like we constantly get in these cycles of just like I'm going to train for this race, I'm going to train for this race, I'm going to train for this race. And a lot of times, I think, I don't want to generalize, but like people get stuck and they just follow like this plan. Oh, this worked last time. I'm going to do this. Oh, this worked last time. Or I lost 10 pounds doing this. I'm going to do it again and again and again. Whereas you have to look at it from that longer term and say, this isn't a one time over and over again. It's how do these things combine and build together? Like that guy, 14 years, and then took second at Hard Rock, right? It wasn't he didn't train for 1 year for Hard Rock. He's been training for 14 years to get to that point.
Yeah. That's a really good point. So it brings me back to this aspect, and you'll continue learning it as you continue going deeper into your endurance endeavors, is knowing what it feels like to run on fatigued legs. And it's a
Mm,
certain heaviness, and it's this idea that everyone talks about. It's like the pain cave, but it's ultimately just learning how to be comfortable with like the way that your legs feel. I never really recognized it until I did a 60-minute workout. It was 60-minute MRAP, 40
mhm.
cals on the air bike, 400-meter run. Every, I think, 8 minutes, you had to do 40 burpees.
Yep.
And I've done in the past, but the goal, I've done in the past where I was like, I think I got like 6 rounds. But a couple of my buddies were like, hey, let's try and shoot for 10 rounds,
Yep.
which is not easy. It's 40 cows on the bike, a 400-meter run. That's like, you're trying to average 2 rounds. It's something like that. Like it's like a round and a half per minute, or 2 rounds for 2 rounds or something like that, however it works. And there was a point where like I had to just go ahead and shut my brain off to not have my legs be in pain anymore.
Yeah. I like took I've obviously I think people do this. You have notes on your phone, and I was reading through a few the other day, like trying to clean stuff up. And when I was out at Tahoe, I written this down. And I don't even know when I wrote it down. So somebody said this because we were talking just about like the difference between 100 and 200. And they said the pain doesn't get worse, it just lasts longer. So it's more about how long you can endure, not the level of pain.
Yeah.
And I think that's exactly it, right? It's not like at a certain point, it's not like it's going to hurt more and more. It's just that it might feel like it hurts more, but that's just because you've been doing it for so much longer. And it's exactly that. What you're saying is like, hey, can you keep going? Yes. It's just how much longer can you endure that same thing over and over and over again?
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. I mean, it goes back to like, last year when I ran my first backyard, when I first ran the backyard ultra for the company, no one had done it yet. I established the course record. Now it's been beat, obviously. Um, I
It's going to
hadn't
be
suffered like that. What's up? It's gonna be said again to you soon this coming month. I actually, I actually hadn't suffered like that in a while.
Mhm.
And but I also in the past when I suffered like that, I was always in a bad headspace. Right, like I
Mm,
don't know if I've shared this plenty of times. I'm sure, and like there's a bunch of old podcasts you can listen to me talk about this, about chasing the dragon,
yep.
and the reason why I was getting into ultra marathon runs at the time period. But last year, I found running ultra marathons or running long distances was no longer this like self deprecating type experience, right?
Mhm.
Like every time I ran 100 miles in that time period, like there was always this in my head, and I don't know, maybe to my crew at the time period, was this huge like emotional experience and like explosion that I felt like from something going on, either my feet blowing up, my ankle rolled, me like taking too much caffeine within a race and having these just like extreme things. And for the
Yeah.
first time last year, running that 100K, I had none of that. It was just like very even keel across the board. And like you saw that, and I was like, man, if you would have saw me in 2018, it was a
Mhm.
completely different George. And it was because of this headspace that I was in of accepting this enduring state of like suffering, where it's like, I am choosing and volunteering myself to be in this state. I also get to choose how long I want to do it, right? And
Yeah.
ultimately, I stopped running and I called it quits because I had an issue on my foot that I was like, it kind of was like either I keep pushing through this and I don't keep training for the next however else, and I'm pretty much out for the count for the family and I'm not gonna be able to help out. And I told myself I'm gonna get back into this. I'm gonna do this and keep myself capable even when I'm done because I have other people who rely on me. It's not just about me,
Yeah. Yep.
right? And within a day, I was fine.
Yeah.
So it is very true. It's a choice about how much am I willing to endure this pain. And again, if I had no foot pain, right? I'm assuming I probably would have kept pushing 100%. But there was an injury that kind of popped in my head, and I was like, oh no, what's going on?
Yeah.
But we go and look at people who do DNF, who don't finish races. It's not the pain of just like their quads blowing up. It is stomach issues of lack of dehydration. It is, we use Cam Hanes, for example. He busted his head open at Coconut 250, had a
Yep.
concussion. We'll go in and look at Tom Evans at Hard Rock 100 this year. He was on the books to take first or second. He had altitude sickness. You go in and look at Hayden Hawks over at Western States. He blew
Yep.
his knee was having issues. You look at Jim Walmsley. You look at Killian Jornet. And you look at Killian Jornet, you look at Hayden Hawks, they're parents.
Yep.
And they've both been doing this a very long time. So where it's like, is it worth grinding through this injury to complete the 100 miles? Or is it better to just pull back, figure out what's going on, recover, rest, and refit, so I can come back and be ready to do it again. And I think that's the difference in thought process here when it comes to these kinds of things.
Yeah, and I think that happened, was it last year or 2 years ago now with David Roach as well, and I know his was a lot
All right, Western states.
mental, and I don't know if there was physical injury necessarily with that, but he went through this whole process because he had just had his kids, or it was David Roach, right? And
Yeah, it
he
was it.
was
Well, he actually had a bike accident. He was in a road
like,
bike
yes,
or
right.
cycling accident.
Yes, and then he started, like, thinking about his kids, like, during that time and, like, couldn't get himself out of this cycle of that, which is just it was just interesting, and now he's come back and, you know, crushed it again.
Yeah, well, he
Or
didn't run 100. He didn't run restaurants. He ran Leadville,
no, he
but
ran,
that
like,
was
his
the thing, though. Yeah, and what's interesting enough though is like, yeah, and he talks a lot about that too, about the we'll call it PTS instead of post traumatic stress.
Yep.
For him, he had a cycling incident that like took him out. He built
Mm,
back up. He has kids now. He has all those other things. Got into westerns, was pushing the pace, started not able to keep down food, started having a panic attack on the course because it's like, well, if I can't keep food down, I keep pushing, am I going to die?
yeah.
Right? Like, and there was that moment where he was like, I don't want to. I got a family, I got kids, I got all these other things. It's where these start to come into play. And I think that's a really good point to highlight is that we're in control of our headspace and where we go. And we're also in control of what we're doing. And we know pushing ourselves at these limits and pushing ourselves at durations, we're opening ourselves up for this. That's at anything, right? Life is so short, like it's at any moment.
Yep.
And I'm going to use the term die living, right? Like, are you going to go ahead and either sit on your couch and be afraid to do things because you're afraid of dying? Or are you just going to go out and live life to the fullest? And whatever happens, happens.
Mhm.
But at least you went out doing what you enjoy doing in a passionate standpoint, right? Like that's the one thing I'm teaching my girls at softball right now from a standpoint. It's like, I rather watch you strike out swinging than watch you strike out just watching the ball. Because
Right.
there's a life lesson in that right there. It's either you're going to go ahead and take a chance and see what happens, or are you
Mhm.
just going to be timid and not?
Well, that's like Hans Troyer this year at Western States, right? They talked about the reason, maybe not the reason, but a big reason that those course records were broken that way was because he pushed like he pushed the pack, and it was a bummer to not see him finish because he really did lead that, and he was driving the pack forward. And you need those people too, right? Like at first they talked a lot about him and doing that, but at the end of the day, it's you see the people that are finishing, right? And the people that did win and break course records. But and he DNF'd at what, 70, 80? It was pretty late.
It was like 73 or so, whatever else. He had to walk it in after Cal. He pretty much started walking it at Cal 2 and Cal 3, and then
Yeah.
ended up calling it in at Rocky Ridge Crossing.
Yeah.
Um,
But, like, without that, without the people and without, like, pushing those things, like, it allows others to do the possible, right? It's like the 4-minute mile. Once it was broken, more and more people started breaking it because you can start to see what's possible out there.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really good point. And it allows others, I use Vincent Badiar. I think that's how he said he took first at Western this past year with like a 13:46. Unbelievable time. And he talked about it too, right? He was like, I wasn't trying to keep up with Hans. I was just
Right.
trying to maintain my race, but I also knew that I could handle maintaining certain efforts at certain parts of the course based off of just knowing how my body feels. And his coach, Michael Ferlierli, I think he's an underground coach. I've been following him for about 3 or 4 years now. Super quiet dude. Um, Also talked about how he kind of knew that Vince was ready to rock and roll and drop under a sub 14. He just wasn't sure what everyone else was going to do. And he told Vince, hey man, like don't race everyone else's race your race. Like you have the legs, you have the ability to do it. You can do this, but I need you to race your race. And you saw how smart a race. I mean, he was in 10th place at like Forest Hill or something like that. Or
Yeah.
before that, he was like in Forest Hill. He was in 10th place. Next thing you know, all of a sudden the dude's in third, then passing up second, and then all of a sudden now is in first place after Greengate. He passes up Francis Papai or Francie Poopy or however you say his name, passed them up on the back end. But again, it's understanding how to utilize your effort going across the board. It's understanding your nutritional intake, right? That he even talks about. He's like, yeah, I wasn't slamming this 100 grams of carbs per hour like Hans Troyer was. Hans was
Yep.
putting in 100 to 120 grams of carbs per hour. And when it got extra hot outside, because it did warm up,
Yep.
he didn't make adjustments on it. And what happened to his gut?
Gone.
That's really what happened. That's
Yep.
what happened. His gut went because of this. Again, it's hard to train your gut to handle 100 grams per hour at that intensity going for 14 hours for 14 hours straight, 20 hours straight. It's just not doable. It's way too much stress on the gut. Way too much stress on the gut.
Yep. Yeah, and I think was it Carbs Fuel, like they just put out like a post recently, and they've been talking a lot more about that as well because they're a relatively high carb gel at 50 grams. And so they've recognized too, like, hey, this is a lot if it's the heat's picking up and everything. So they also have their 25 and something they've recommended for like simplicity because right when you're running, you don't want to be thinking. It's just like, hey, every 45 minutes I'm taking this gel, taking this, do whatever it is they've said, well, take our 50 and then the next time you take the 25 and then rotating through them, especially in those
Mhm.
hotter parts of the day. And whatever you're using, right? But like rotating between a high and a low so that you're not having to think, oh, what did I take last time versus, this next time.
Well, that's a really good point, actually. When we ran at that Rocky River trail,
Mhm.
you carried 75 grams of carbs on you. I carried 75 grams of carbs on me.
Yep.
And we moved for 2.5 hours. And I moved relatively well until that last like 30 minutes. And then
Hmm.
like I started losing gas and you actually started picking up gas. And we go to look at body weight percentage wise, like I'm 210 pounds and you're 100 and what, 55,
55. Yeah.
right? So like 75 grams for you in 2.5 hours compared to my 75 grams of carbs in 2.5 hours is completely different,
Hmm.
right? Like it, so this goes into this case, and what I'm trying to highlight is the fact that like, yeah, like utilizing this high-low method or understanding body weight and carbohydrate expenditure, energy expenditure, and calorie expenditure, it all comes back to being able to just kind of, again, experiment on what it is you need to find that works for you. And I think
Yeah.
that's the biggest theme here is like, all right, you're now dialing what needs to work from you. It is maybe we don't need 70 grams of carbs per hour for you when it's that hot out. Maybe you don't even need 70 grams of carbs per hour. Maybe
Yep.
50 is perfect for you.
Well, and I think that too goes to like male female, right? There's obviously a lot less studies done on females right now and they're getting better, but it's like how male versus female like metabolize, right? Fats versus uh carbs too.
Yeah, dude. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think it's a great point. But yeah, I think that's good. I mean, at the end of the day, it's all about knowing your system and having someone to help you figure that out and help navigate it so that you can have someone to bounce back off of. Which is what our business is, right? What Omni Athlete Training Systems is. It's not just a hey, I'm just going to give you a training program and you're going to figure it out. It's no, it's like, hey, how is this working within your lifestyle? How is this making your life less stressful? Hey, are we returning back from injury to help get you back moving correctly? Are we doing all these things? And this is kind of one of those things where we do for you. Yes, is Sam one of my athletes? 100%, but she's also a coach in the company. And the great thing about that is she's learning and we're able to communicate and talk. And I'm actually stoked that we're able to talk about this on a call for people to actually kind of listen to and see how we can kind of dive into the coach and athlete relationship and the process of looking at how we can make adjustments and go from there. So, with that being said, if you guys are interested in learning more about what it is that Omni Athlete Training Systems is, as well as what it is we're doing here at Omni University, please reach out to us either at george@omniathletetraining.com or sam@omniathletetraining.com. I currently have a wait list for clients. So if you reach out to me and you don't want to work with me because you have a wait list, we have Sam. We also have some new news coming up here soon as well. with someone else coming on board, and he's going to be doing completely different stuff than what Sam and I are doing. And that's the cool thing, is we're trying to bring a huge um, diversity of coaches into the company, to where we're not walking over each other, but only supporting each other. So keep an eye out for that. As well as we're also getting ready to drop the new cycle on Omni Life for those who are wanting to just follow a generic style program. That drops July 20th. If you're interested in mental performance coaching as well, go ahead and reach out to us as well. We'll get you hooked up with Savannah, who can help you improve the mind game as well. Outside of that, go ahead and share this with others if you're interested in doing it. And if you're not in Omni University, come join us in the school community. We're slowly growing and implementing new courses and everything else like that. We just got done finishing up with the Sleep 101 course. And if you are in the community and listening to this and you haven't taken the Sleep 101 course, highly recommend you guys go ahead and take that. So yeah, outside that, have a great week, and we'll catch you guys next time.